The title of this sermon comes from a concept found in the Bible, but it's actually verbatim not in the Bible. It's an odd term called traveling mercies, which often you see in prayers, God grant me, God grant ye, traveling mercies, which means may, God's blessing be upon you in your journey. And that was the inspiration for today's sermon. Because the scripture this morning is the 121st Psalm, Lamsa translation, and it's known as one of the Psalms of Ascents. It's one of 15 songs sung by Jews making an annual pilgrimage to Jerusalem. And the author of this psalm describes what it's like to make the steep trek up the hills to that city, one that was not safe by any means. But seeing the holy city in the distance fills them with security. It's a sentiment often and poetically summed up as traveling mercies. Here's the 121st Psalm. I will lift up mine eyes to the mountain from whence comes my help. My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord will protect you with his right hand. The sun shall not smite you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will preserve you from all evil. He will preserve your soul. The Lord will preserve your going out and your coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. In 2019, InStyle magazine published an article by travel writer Caitlin Aber entitled, Why You Should Pack 2 Weeks Before Any Trip. Imagine the version of yourself that could pull that off. Miss Aber wrote, in my early 20s, I used to wait until the last possible minute to pack. Never had the adage, wherever you go, there you are, rang so true. Because there I was, leaky shower caddy in my carry-on, outfits kind of wonky, taking a cab to the local Target for underwear and asking my friends if I could borrow their sunglasses because mine were always broken or missing. She wrote, when I am messy, I carry around a lot of stuff with me. My personal chaos feels like carrying around a grouchy, unreliable travel companion who could betray me at any turn. Now that's some sage advice as we prepare for the summer travel season and also illuminating for each of us well on that journey called life. And in this light, let me repeat her last sentence. I carry a lot of stuff with me. My personal chaos feels like carrying around a grouchy, unreliable travel companion who could betray me at any turn. Now here, metaphysically, we tend to look at our time here on earth as this one important karmic journey. But more practical, no less metaphysical, our time here is actually countless important karmic journeys because everything is a journey. And I don't mean just your trip to church this morning or your daily commute to work, but being called into your boss's office, battling an illness, raising a child, interacting with a stranger, embracing a challenge, receiving a windfall, meditating, loving, resenting. Each one is different, each one requiring its own special skill set. And to be as successful as possible, as Aber points out, free from chaos. Now, metaphysically speaking, this means free from error thinking, as we like to say here, especially error thinking translated into action or reaction, which runs counter to our higher selves. So I was very delighted last Sunday when Reverend Kathy Poland invited us in her healing service to write aspects of ourselves and lives that we wanted to set aside, and on another card, aspects that we wanted to illuminate. And if you spend enough time in our pews here, you've probably surmised that this is one of the tentpole aims of divine metaphysics. It's appeared in a number of my own sermons. Some of you might remember my references to the rock in your rucksack, those things we carry around which actually slow down our progress. Even my Thanksgiving sermon last year, what's in your cornucopia? I spoke of how, for better, for worse, we manifest abundantly based on what's inside us. Now, when I mentioned writing this sermon with an old mentor of mine in the Presbyterian Church, he excitedly shared that traveling mercies was the subject of the very first sermon he'd given as an ordained minister. And getting online and reading his, my inner academic loved how he differentiated between human mercy and the Torah's concept of mercy, which is called chesed. He wrote, "Unlike human mercy, it cannot be exhausted, but it isn't blind to human failures either. Mercy is unbounded love that promises forgiveness, faithfulness, and patience on the one hand, and requires justice, responsibility, and obedience on the other." And for me, that's the real treasure of divine metaphysics, because we flawed humans have the capacity for the former, greater mercy. Pondering this, I had a flashback to me as this antsy 12-year-old sitting in my family's Methodist church where Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, we were urged to let Christ into our hearts. And I remember that antsy 12-year-old vividly thinking, Sunday after Sunday, but if God is everywhere, shouldn't we be talking about how to let God out? And with this in mind, I'm compelled to reconsider three travelers described by Jesus in the book of Luke: a priest, a Levite, and a Samaritan. And we know the story well, most of us. Each one comes across a man beaten and robbed and left for dead on the side of a road. And the traveler, the priest, someone we could rightfully expect to walk a godly path and embody this divine mercy, chesed, what does he do? He crosses to the other side of the road. The Levite, by name alone, implies an exalted lineage descended from the original Israelite tribe of Levi. Surely he'd demonstrate noblesse oblige to this poor, unfortunate soul. But no, he too gives the injured man a wide berth. It's the lesser regarded Samaritan who finally comes to the rescue. And this leads me to ponder, what was it that blocked the higher selves of the priest and the Levi, preventing them from helping the injured stranger? Jesus doesn't say. Fear, suspicion, an illusion of social or spiritual superiority? We can't even be sure what it was that enabled the Samaritan to stop that day. Perhaps as a social outsider, empathy cleared the way for mercy this time, this journey. In this story, all we know is that for two of the three travelers, human frailty, or in the words of our travel writer, chaos, did them a spiritual disservice. The final time I traveled home to Florida because my mother was dying, I was prepared. A travel bag with my best suit had been in the trunk of my car after the first time I was called home. And it was on that visit where the home care hospice nurses helped me see that our mother's dying was her personal journey. It was not about us. And this helped me let her experience it on her terms, even when watching her have quiet conversations with her father, who had died well before I was born. And on subsequent visits home, my older brother, who'd been a formidable and intimidating presence in my childhood, he'd stopped working for almost 3 years to move in with our mother, enabling her to live at home and continue as the heart of our family. I saw how her inevitable passing weighed upon him, along with the specter of his own unknown future when she would be gone. With gratitude and loving kindness, I realized that we didn't need to be on the same page. In years earlier, fearing bickering and possible estrangement over her estate, I pled with Mom to include specific instructions in her will, but she would have none of it. And a clear, confident voice said in my head, if her children can't get along when she's gone, that's on us, not her. She's shown us how to love. So that final trip, I didn't depart for Florida knowing it would be the last time. It was just another one of my regular visits to simply be with her. So I started the drive after work, stress-free, even in the crawl of DC's famous rush hour. And somewhere down in Southern Virginia, my brother called. And he says, "Are you on your way?" I said, "I am." He says, "I don't want you to rush, but the hospice workers say it's going to happen anytime now. Get here when you can, but don't be stupid." And my immediate thought was, I can do this. I'm going to drive straight through the night. You know, it's a 14, 15-hour trip. I'm going to drive straight through the night. I can do this. And as I got into North Carolina, I knew it was already 8 p.m., and I had been up since 6 a.m., and it was not going to be possible, but still I drove. And finally, somewhere in my head, I began to talk, and I talked to my father who had died when I was 24 years old. And I said, "Dad, I didn't ask you for much growing up. That's not how we work. I didn't ask you for much growing up, but I'm asking you this now. I'm supposed to be there. I'm supposed to be there with her. And if you're coming for her, you give me 24 hours. That is all I'm going to ask from you." And then I was overcome with this sense of peace. And I drove and I stopped and I found a hotel, went to bed, woke up early, and drove on my way down. When I got to home in Florida, the hospice workers had come and gone. And I went to the room and sat with my mother. Was quietly in her bed, not really there, not really gone. And my sister, who characteristically shied away from difficult things, she'd usually spend her time in the living room, but she came in and joined me. And then my brother came into the room, and suddenly, just the three of us there, the four of us there with our mother, we could tell it was time. And my mom, who had been existing in this twilight for weeks and weeks, opened her eyes widely and looked me in the eye. And I said, "Thank you, Mom." And she looked at my sister for a long time in the eye. And my sister said, "It's okay. We love you." And my brother said, "I love you, Mom." And we held her hands, thanking her and telling her how much we loved her and that it was okay. And she looked me in the eye intently and deeply, and then looked over my shoulder and got this huge smile on her face, like a 12-year-old girl who had walked into her own birthday party. And then she was gone. No, I share this not to be a hero in my mother's story, but to share what we're capable of, what is capable, what can happen when we take the time to set aside things that won't serve us for a journey, even if that journey is a mere moment. Revisiting the words of my old mentor's sermon, unlike human mercy, it cannot be exhausted, but it isn't blind to human failures either. Mercy is unbounded love that promises forgiveness, faithfulness, and patience on the one hand, and requires justice, responsibility, and obedience on the other. Among our countless journeys, we will be the Samaritan at times, but sometimes we will be the priest or the Levite. And in those moments, we must extend ourselves loving kindness, loving mercy, and learn how we fell short. What kept our highest self in the background at that moment? You know, here we spend a lot of time discovering our highest selves. We know what it's like to live and move through that state of unbound divinity, and we know that it is ours. That, as I mentioned previously, is the treasure of metaphysics. But that is balanced by our profound responsibility of clearing the way for it to manifest, not just in private sacred moments, but in everyday life. And may you be blessed with traveling mercies now and forevermore.